How's it going, YouTube? Got FourthStarTCG here, and today I am going to talk about the Wild West of buying from Japan. I've done a video on this previously about the sort of risks and benefits of buying from Japan, but I think after about a year or so, it's time for an update on this video. So first I'm going to go over why people buy from Japan, some of the benefits that you can get from buying from Japan, and then I'm going to talk about the risks of buying from Japan. And I really feel like the risks have significantly increased over the past year, to the point that it really feels like even experienced people are getting scammed, are getting hosed buying from Japan, and you have to be extremely careful on what you bid on what you buy these days, because it truly is the Wild West buying from Japan, especially as a Westerner. So I'm going to discuss why people buy from Japan, and I'm going to discuss the serious risks that have really increased over the past year. So first off, why do people buy from Japan? You know, everyone talks about Japan, these Japanese marketplaces, Mercari, Yahoo Japan, as this sort of gold mine where you can go and you can get, you know, raw mint cards all the time. You can get super rare cards, trophy cards, and, you know, some of that, it's true to a degree. One of the main reasons people buy from Japan is availability. It's very rare that you're going to find a random Japanese trophy card listed on a Western marketplace. If you want that, you probably have to go to the Japanese marketplaces. And also for other Japanese cards, you know, for a lot of my collection goals, things like the Japanese black and white era ultra rares, those are very rarely listed on English marketplaces, on Western marketplaces. So buying from Japan, that's kind of the only option that I have. So for getting those rare, especially older Japanese cards, buying from Japan, that's often going to be your main outlet if you want to buy these cards ungraded. And, you know, if you're looking to maximize your value, oftentimes you can acquire cards for lower prices than you would on the Western market, where most of these cards have already been, you know, sort of taken out, graded, their value has been optimized. There is the opportunity to to generate some value, either whether you're looking to flip, whether you're looking to get the most for your money. Buying from Japan can be a good value proposition. So those are sort of the main reasons why people buy from Japan. Number one, availability, and number two, price. You're able to find more cards, and occasionally when you do find those cards, you are able to purchase them for less than these cards would cost if you were buying them on the Western marketplace. So I love buying from Japan. It's been a really sort of integral part of my collecting, but I'm really getting a lot more wary of it recently. And the reason is that buying from Japan has zero buyer protection. And I really want to emphasize this: zero buyer protection. So if you buy something, you are relying fully on the faith of that seller to deliver that item. Middleman services generally have little to no power over what sellers will do. And sellers will often, especially over the past year, I've noticed this happening a lot more, sellers will look to sell to middleman services to Western buyers because it is easier to scam. So I think a lot of people are somewhat, they don't realize what zero buyer protection means. They're used to eBay, where if anything is wrong with your order, you can get a refund, and they expect that the same thing is true on these Japanese marketplaces, when in reality, basically the opposite is true. So just as an example, here's what the buyer protection on Yahoo Japan is like. Yahoo offers very limited buyer protection. So how the payment works on Yahoo Japan is that Yahoo acts as basically a payment intermediary. So when you buy something off of Yahoo Japan, the buyer sends the payment to Yahoo, and then the seller ships the item. And after the seller ships the item and the buyer confirms receipt of the item, then Yahoo pays the seller, and there's no reversing that transaction once the seller is paid, once the item has arrived. If there's a discrepancy, say maybe you received something you didn't order, the condition is off, Yahoo can sort of work to facilitate a dialogue between the buyer and the seller, but it's entirely up to the seller whether they accept a refund. This isn't like eBay where if there's a problem, eBay can step in and force a refund. No, it's all up to the seller. And many sellers will basically explicitly say that they won't engage in a return process at all. They'll say no claim, no return. I'm sure that's a very familiar saying to a lot of people who have bought from Yahoo Japan in these Japanese marketplaces. So what middleman services will do, and why these middleman services are so attractive to scammers, is that middlemen will basically confirm receipt of any package and the seller basically gets immediately paid. So middleman services, even when they offer this additional kind of buyer protection, it's not like they can go to the seller and get their money back. If a middleman service ends up refunding you, that's coming out of their own pocket. It's not taking that money away from the seller. So a lot of people I've heard say, oh, we have to, force middlemen services to refund us on scams because then the sellers will never learn. No, the sellers get paid whether they scam you or not. So it's really advantageous for these sellers to scam middleman services, to scam Westerners, because there's almost no repercussions for these sellers. Oftentimes, middleman services will even leave positive feedback for scammers. And they'll just block them from previous bidding, and they'll pass this on to the person who bought the item. Now, I hear people saying, "Oh, well, Buy, Zen Market, they offer additional buyer protection that you can purchase," and this is true. Buy offers this kind of inspection plan. Same with Zen Market. They offer plans where you can purchase buyer protection, and they'll double check and make sure that everything works out. But this buyer protection in theory versus this buyer protection in practice is very different. So I have an example of a transaction that happened to one of my friends who is a very experienced Pokemon collector. He knows what he's doing on these Japanese marketplaces, and he, purchased the additional buyer protection. He did all his due diligence looking at these listings, but he still got screwed. So we're going to look at the listing and the response from Buy, the middleman service, to really, look at how these scams happen and how people get hosed no matter what they do, no matter what steps they take to protect themselves. So here I have the listing that my friend purchased. So this is a lot of cards on Yahoo Japan. And the seller described that there was about 5,000 cards in this lot. And as you can see, there are some pretty nice cards here. We have a Fan Club Magikarp, pretty nice, looks pretty mint as well. We have a Shining Charizard, again, looks pretty mint, very nice. Shining Mewtwo, again, looking very good on the back here. And what do you know, we also have a no rarity Charizard, which again, strangely very, very mint. Shining Mew as well. So there, we can look at the description here, and the description, I'll just sort of briefly translate this here. This says 5,000 cards, about 700 are holographic, and it says there are some big shining cards that are also available in this lot. Now, a lot of people are, what happens a lot on these Japanese marketplaces, and buried in the description, there will be things, there will be sort of gotcha things. They'll say, oh, you'll get this card, this like play Espeon, or you'll get this energy card, and it's a random lot drawing. None of that is here. The description doesn't say anything about cards not being included, about it being a lottery listing. It actually lists all of the expensive cards that are included. So you look at this, you say, hey, this is a pretty good deal. All the cards are listed, everything looks good. This is going to be a great purchase. So my friend purchased this. He won it for 190,000 yen, which you can see it in Canadian dollars, about $2,000. In US dollars, I'd say that's probably about $1,600 to $1,700. And he was a little suspicious about this. So he actually contacted Bai, and he mentioned that he was suspicious about this because he was initially outbid on this lot, but then the seller canceled the higher bids to end up selling to him, which was, he felt a little strange. Why would a seller cancel higher bids in order to sell to someone who bid lower? This doesn't really make sense. But as we discussed earlier, it's advantageous for these sellers to scam middleman services. So what likely happened in this case was the seller saw that someone who was using a middleman service was bidding. What they did was they canceled all of the bids from people in Japan in order to intentionally sell to someone using a middleman service and get scammed. Now, my friend was pretty smart. He bought the extra buyer protection for this lot, and he actually contacted Bai while this was still in their warehouse and said, hey, can you look for these cards? So Bai did. They looked through the entire 5,000 card lot, and what do you know? There were missing cards. What's missing out of the 5,000 cards? Well, it's all the really expensive ones. So my friend actually paid about 2,500 yen for Bai to look through this and find these expensive cards that were missing. He said, hey, these cards are really valuable. I want to make sure they're there before I ship this lot over to me. So Bai goes through, they confirm, hey, these expensive cards, they're missing. So he says, all right, well, can you refund me since I bought the additional buyer protection? And they say, sure, of course we'll refund you. Now, what does Bai refund him? Well, they say that in the case of a successful claim, the compensation will be prorated instead of issuing a full refund. So they say 5 cards are missing out of 5,000. So you get 1/1000th of the purchase price refunded. So out of the 190,000 yen purchase price, they refund him 190 yen. Because the Shining Mew, the Shining Charizard, the Shining Mewtwo, and the Fan Club Shining Magikarp are missing. 190 yen for those 5 cards. So my friend did everything right, but he's still getting screwed. He checked the description, he checked the seller feedback, he bought the extra buyer protection, but he's still getting hosed by a Yahoo Japan scammer and by the middleman service as well. The middleman service is not living up to that buyer protection. So Yahoo Japan is really the Wild West here, and people need to realize that. They need to realize that when they're looking for purchasing from Japan, they need to be okay with that money disappearing. Buying from Japan has gotten a lot more risky over the past year. I've heard of other scams as well. I've heard of people getting tricked by these lottery scams where sellers will post a picture of an expensive card, and then buried deep in the description, they'll say, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lottery listing. You get the expensive card or you get an energy card. You never get the expensive card. You always get the energy card. It's a scam. I've also heard of people who were, again, tricked by these buried in the description things, saying if you don't communicate with us within 1 day of purchase, we ship a different card. And people getting scammed that way by a middleman service not contacting them because it's buried deep in the description, and the middleman service doesn't check every listing, and shipping a different card. I've heard things saying if you can't communicate in Japanese, we send a different card. Obviously the middleman service can communicate in Japanese, but it's this sort of trick that these sellers will use to scam middleman services. And when these lottery listings, people get scammed on these lottery listings, the middleman services will not pay out, even if you buy the extra buyer protection service. So Yahoo Japan scams, especially scams on lots of cards, lots, not like large number, but lots on like job lots of cards, if you know what I mean, have become a lot more common. And I really feel like you need to be super vigilant when you're buying from Japan these days. So my tips from buying from Japan, my recommendations, I have a couple. The first is never spend more than you're comfortable losing. If you have $5,000 in the bank account and you want to spend, $3,000 on a card, and you're going to be screwed if that card just sort of vanishes and you get scammed on it, don't do it. Really take that zero buyer protection to heart. So that's the first recommendation. Never spend more than you can afford to lose on these Japanese marketplaces. The second recommendation is to really do your homework. Spend a lot of time researching. What are the common scams? What have people run into? How can I avoid issues on Yahoo Japan? Again, sort of just kind of use the old adages. Is it too good to be true, right? Am I getting a lot of, mint shining cards for 25% of their market value? Does this sound right? If it doesn't look right, chances are something is off and you should stay away. Buy from sellers with good feedback, and if something works out, keep buying from that seller. I mentioned this previously, but sellers with good feedback on Yahoo Japan, sellers that are established, sellers that are stores, that are actual businesses as opposed to just random people, there's going to be a much lower likelihood that these established sellers are going to scam middleman services and scam Westerners purchasing from Japan. So exercise caution, but focus your purchasing on established sellers that have good reputations. If you buy from a seller and everything works out, keep your eye on their Yahoo Japan account. If they might list more cards, and if you know that they work well with middleman services in the past, then chances are, you've found something good for the future. And sort of last but not least, my recommendation is to approach everything with a skeptical eye. Never bid on something quickly. Never get sort of caught up in this is an amazing card, I have to do this, I have to bid on this card, I'm going to lose it in the next 5 minutes. Really do your homework. Really look deep into that description. And if anything looks off, if there's, you dig into the seller feedback, you dig into their previous listings, you keep an eye on what they're doing. You really want to be as nitpicky as possible. And if you see any red flags, you don't touch it. only bid on items from established sellers, from sellers with good feedback, that you've read the description thoroughly and there aren't any red flags there. They aren't continuously listing duplicate items. They show good pictures. All of this stuff you really want to focus on when you are buying from Japan. So I hope this video has helped people out with buying from Japan. And again, buying from Japan is not for the faint of heart. You really need to know what you're doing when you're getting into this. There's some possibility that you can get some, great deals there, but even one scam can wipe out, months of good deals that you've gotten from these Japanese marketplaces. So, hope this was helpful. Thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stick around for more videos.